When Tracy approached me about the opportunity to speak, she said, you can come, you can speak on anything, and, I'm a Libra, that's tough. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to possibly come up with? But I quickly settled on the confidence gap between men and women. And this confidence gap is between the genders is actually very well documented. There are a lot of scientific studies and research by sociologists and others, and it's a topic that I think is particularly relevant to men as well as to women. And so my approach today is really with this question in mind. How can we have more awareness about these issues, including in the workplace, but also in your private lives and personal lives? And importantly, how can we foster confidence in individuals at every level, both men and in particular with women, from folks who are very junior in their career to really literally heads of federal agencies. Now, I've been interested in this topic for a number of years, and I actually, right when I got confirmed, it was May of 2014 by the U.S. Senate to be the Assistant Secretary, there was an article in the Atlantic magazine, and it was one of the cover stories, and it's called, it's based on a book by Katie Kay and Claire Shipman, and if you Google it, it's called The Gender Confidence Gap, and if you Google it, you will be able to find it. It's still up on their website, and it's based on a book that they had written, so it's kind of a summary, sort of a fashion thing. And I had read it, and it was kind of interesting, and I was moving into this new role, and I had this really interesting personal experience. I was walking down the street one day, and getting ready to pack and go on, and I ran into a former colleague, and she had been an associate at the firm, and I work in a very large law firm. We have over 2,400 attorneys worldwide in over 30 offices, and so it's what they affectionately call big law, right? So that's where I work. And there's a hierarchy in these law firms, and it starts with staff, and then the paralegals, and then the associates, and then the counsel, and then the income partners who are non-equity partners, so they have the title of partner, but they don't have equity in the law firm, and then there are equity partners. Equity partners are paid substantially more than anyone else in the law firm. And they're the ones who are primarily responsible with bringing in the business. I guess I should say we. I had just read this article, and I run into this colleague, and she had been an associate, she had gone into government, and she had been working in the Solicitor General's office. This is the office in Washington that represents the United States in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. And because I'm nosy, I said, I heard you're coming back to the firm. What are they offering you? Tell me, what are they offering you? We're literally on the street. And she was like, well, we're talking about me coming back as an income partner. I'm talking to some other firms, same level. I'm excited about the opportunity. And I was really struck by her willingness to accept that level and that role. And I said, well, let me just ask a couple of questions. It's none of my business, but I'm nosy, and so I'm going to ask them anyway. So how many oral arguments have you done in front of the United States Supreme Court? And she says, 10. And I'm like, 10? This is the highest court in the land, okay? And I said, so just, for my benefit, how many women in the United States are there that have done 10 arguments in front of the United States Supreme Court? And she says 5. And I'm like, so you're like one of the 5, right? Am I understanding this? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, you should ask for equity. Like, what are you kidding me? Like, why are you settling for an income partnership? Any guy, who's in that, practice group, the appellate practice group, if they had 10 arguments, they'd be in there saying, I want some money. You're going to pay me money because I've got a reputation. And she looked at me like I had 12 heads. I mean, 12. She was like, what? what? Why would I do something like that? I was like, what do you mean, why? I'm not looking at, we're both looking at each other like we're insane, right? So I said, and I was really struck by it. I was really struck by it. Here's someone who's advocating for others in front of the highest court in this country, but she's not willing or comfortable to advocate for herself. Why is that? And I will tell you, she's not alone. There's a really interesting series of articles on CNN. Dana Bash did it. It's a great series. It's called Badass Women of Washington. And if you get a chance, it's worthwhile. And she profiles a lot of women leaders, and they're vignettes, and they're really worth taking a look at. One of the women that she profiles is a 3-star Army general, Surgeon General, Nadja West. She's the highest-ranking woman to graduate from West Point, and she almost did not apply to medical school because she thought she couldn't get in. And it was a chance meeting, and I was really struck by this. It was a chance meeting that she had in an elevator with someone she respected who said, what do you have to lose, right? I mean, if you don't throw your hat in the ring, you know, you're no worse off than by not trying. When I moved to the Obama administration and over to the Interior Department, I was there were a broad range of men and women, you know, coming into the office in different places in their careers, both within the different agencies, and there are 10 agencies at Interior for folks who are less familiar with it. And because of that, all the meetings are very large, right? You know, if you're going to a meeting at Interior, there's always a large gaggle of people, you know, 20 plus. It's a little odd, but it's not that unusual. And I was struck by the fact that women never sat at the conference table. I mean, I had a huge conference table. It probably sat, 16 people easily. And women would come in, and there's a row of chairs because the groups are so large on the wall, behind everybody, and women would always go there. And so, I had a mentor very early in my career, and she said, when you go into a room, if there's a seat at the conference table, you take it. You take it, and if you can sit as close to the decision maker as possible, get that seat. That's the best seat. Go do it. And so she had pushed me early on in my career. So I was like, okay, how am I going to get these women, to sit at the table? So I came up with a line, and I would see someone, and they'd go there, and I'd say, in my conference room, women sit at the table. So what? And if I was being really mean, I'd make them sit right next to me. Oh, no, here. You can come right here, because I want to talk to you, right? And they were like, why is this happening to me? And you would really try to engage them in conversation. And when I was leaving, one of the last days at the department back in January, one of the women came up to me, and she actually told me how impactful it was for her personally to actually be invited to sit at the table. It really made a difference in terms of how she perceived herself. That's sort of a simple gesture. And, one of my favorite lines that Secretary Jewell had was, if you're not at the table, you are on the menu. And it's true. It's kind of true. I mean, obviously that's more of a political metaphor, but I think it's a good analogy. So let me go to some slides, and I don't normally read slides because obviously you can all read. I don't know if the people in the back, if they're like me, they wear glasses, it doesn't really help. But I'm going to read these because these are some of the basic research points. Many of you probably are familiar with some of these points, but I think it's important to just underscore what the studies show. So studies have found that in comparison to men, women tend to have lower sense of self-confidence, which impacts them in their status both personally and professionally, and contributes to a gap in achievement between men and women. Due to the gender confidence gap, women in the workplace may exhibit less confidence, be more likely to turn down opportunity, and be less likely to ask for opportunities, particularly key stretch opportunities. even when they come up. Studies show that men overestimate their abilities and performance, while women underestimate their abilities and performance. But when you look closely at the studies, their performances do not differ in quality. And for the folks here from Hewlett-Packard, after they reviewed their personnel records, they found that women applied for a promotion only when they believed they met 100% of the qualifications, whereas men applied for that same promotion when they believed they met 60% of the qualifications. A Harvard Business Review study found that when asked why women didn't apply for a job, and men as well, twice as many women as men said, "I didn't think they would hire me because I didn't meet the qualifications, and I didn't want to put myself out there if I was likely to fail." Now, on to what Natasha was talking about a little bit earlier, negotiations. The research shows that men initiate salary negotiations 4 times as often as women do. And when women do negotiate, they ask for 30% less money. And obviously, I agree with Natasha. Gender bias and unconscious bias absolutely play a role here, but I think it's important to recognize that confidence also plays a key role in just being willing to put yourself out there. So, no surprise, men graduates had higher starting salaries compared to women graduates coming out of the exact same MBA program. Now, here's some wrinkles, and I'm reading a pretty interesting book that came out recently by Therese Houston. It's called How Women Decide, and so this material is actually taken from her book. And again, the studies show little boys are socialized to take risks, while little girls are not. Little girls are often more protected. They're not, hey, get on the slide now, and if you're scared, try it again. And you go to the playground and you see, people, treating little boys and little girls differently, just in terms of risk and play and how all of that occurs. So it's not unusual that women feel more anxiety around taking risk, and so they take fewer risks. Men are far more willing to just wing it, and and just go for it. And so as a result, in meetings, men tend to speak up more. They tend to be more spontaneous, as a general matter, than women do. And I was struck, actually, on this point. I was on my flight out here, and I ran into a male colleague who was on the flight with me to Denver, and I said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he says, I'm going out to speak at a conference." He was going to Colorado to the National Renewable Energy Lab. He works now for a private company. And he said, "Yeah, my colleague got sick, and he called me yesterday, and he asked me to do this." And so he was getting on a plane like the next day to do it tomorrow, actually today. And I said, "So what are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know." I was like, "Okay, well, good luck, good luck with that." And, I'm on the plane, and I'm working on my talk, right? I mean, I've only known about it for 8 months, okay? And so I'm like, I got to get it right. I got to work on it and make sure every word is right. And I go back to the restroom, and, I go by his seat. What's he doing? He's watching a movie. Of course he's watching a movie. And he was completely comfortable. I saw him after the flight. He's like, "Yeah, I got it. No problem." It's true story. And here's the flip side, and the studies do show this as well. And this is kind of the full disclosure, as we like to say in law. Risk-taking is not viewed as being a positive trait for women, and it's right down there with being assertive. I mean, it's pretty low on the list, okay? And so you have to be aware that this is how society, views women who are A, assertive, and B, inclined to take risks. And women are judged more harshly if they take a risk and make a decision in business and it goes awry, doesn't go well, they're criticized more. And the studies are quite clear about that, particularly if it's in an area that is more traditionally viewed as being a male-oriented role, which is basically business, okay? I mean, it's mostly the work arena. So you have to be aware of these sorts of things, and you have to be aware that being overconfident and overtaking risks is not necessarily a good thing either. It can cloud judgment and undercut performance just as a general matter. So awareness is really key. And one of the things we talked about in the skill builder is kind of knowing when to dial up your confidence and when to kind of dial it back down in terms of your communication skills, and recognizing your audience, which is really important, and trying to find ways to talk with them so that they actually hear what you're saying and don't take offense to it. So one of the things I learned somewhat early on in my career when I moved from the federal government to the private sector was, don't start every sentence with no, right? Nobody likes to hear, no, that's wrong. Now, you may think that, and that may be your judgment, but how you say it, is important. Because when I was in government as an attorney, they couldn't fire me. If the client didn't like me, the agency didn't like me, they were stuck with me. So, but when I moved to the private sector, they could fire you. So, no, you're stupid is not a good way, to really have a strong client relationship. So and sometimes clients say the dangest things. And so I learned, well, that's an interesting perspective. Let's talk about some other perspectives. What do you think about this perspective? And then you try to, kind of work your position in. And, if they're resistant, you bring in some support, like that. So, anyway. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my own personal views on how to navigate, all of these particular issues. These are my lessons learned. First, be willing to take reasonable risks. They can be small, one step at a time. I was struck by Meredith yesterday taking the risk of writing that letter to Linda Ellerby. I mean, I watched that show. It was an amazing show. But it was a big risk, and it changed your life. And importantly, don't be afraid to ask for help. Bring in resources when you can bring in those resources to make a particular project successful. And I'll give you a good example. It was my very first trial. I had been in the Interior Department in the solicitor's office, and I wanted to litigate. I'm ready to do it. I want to do it. I go over to the Justice Department, and they say, welcome. I had been there, I think, 6 days. Welcome. Here's a trial. This is your trial. It's on expedited path. You need to be on a plane tomorrow taking depositions. And so I was like, oh my God, what have I just done? What have I gotten myself into? I'm on a plane. I'm reading a book about how to take a deposition. And I'm like panicked, I'm like, holy cow. Oh my gosh. And it was a lot of work, and it was quick, and I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I went to my boss and I said, I need help. I need second chair. I need some help. And she said, no. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to fail. I was like freaking out. I lost weight. I was just like, holy cow. Oh my God, am I hyperventilating? And I went to a colleague of mine. And I said, I'm troubled. I'm troubled about my skill set here. You know, can you talk to the boss? You know, she respects you, and I'm just new, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I could use some help. And that colleague of mine went privately to my boss and said, you know, she could use some help. Let's give her some help. I'll help her. Come on. And boom, I got a second chair, and it changed not only how I felt about what was going on, but we were able to put together a really strong defense. And after a 4-day trial down in Florida, in which the judge only mocked me once, yeah, that was funny. We had a successful outcome for the government, so that was good. Lesson number 2, throw your hat in the ring for some new responsibilities and opportunities. Stretch a little bit, be curious. I'm curious by nature, which has been a problem. It used to annoy my dad. I'll give you my dad's story. You know, he was like, stop asking so many questions, you know, like, okay, but why are you just saying that to me, Dad? So, yeah, so we had a great relationship. Learn and try new things, you know, and as you think about career advancement, it's okay to move laterally. You know, you don't always have to move up. Sometimes you can move laterally and get some additional skills that eventually will help you move up. And sometimes you actually have to leave your organization to come back at a higher level in that organization. And I can assure you that if I had stayed in the solicitor's office, which was a great gig, I never would have become assistant secretary. Never. It just would not have happened. I had to leave, go to the private sector, collect a bunch of additional life experiences, and then come back and have that opportunity. Don't be afraid. This is lesson number 3. Don't be afraid to let people know what you want. Many women assume that if they keep their head down and they work hard, they're going to get noticed. Maybe, or maybe not. Some people are going to be perfectly happy to keep you there, working away, while someone else is taking the credit for all of your work. I read a recent article about a judge who recently issued an order requiring that women do the oral arguments in his court. You know, not every oral argument, but he basically said, I'm not seeing enough women actually getting stand-up experience in court. I know they're writing all the briefs. They're back in the back till 2 o'clock in the morning writing the briefs, and then all the guys are, you know, up there, you know, let me tell you why I'm right. So, you know, it's important. It's important. And remember, you know, your male colleague is probably in your boss's office telling him or her right now how great he is, you know. So, I mean, you're here, but he's got her, you know. He's back there. Hey. You know it's true, right? Yeah. Gail's going, yeah. Let them know you're interested in that opportunity and that you'd like to have a chance to throw your hat in the ring. It may not come, but being vocal about it and just saying, hey, I'm interested, sometimes makes them think, oh, God, I didn't even know that. I thought you were happy, you know, back in the corner. Next lesson, pick your battles strategically and play for the long term. And, the best lesson from Washington is don't burn any of your bridges. Get advice from somebody you trust. And, you know, sometimes things are going to happen that are annoying or not fair. I have a fair button. I don't know. Who has a fair button? No, not too many. Okay, I have a fair button. If it's not fair, I'm pissed. Okay, especially if it's not fair to me. And so I had an experience in my confirmation process where people said, are you sure you want to do that? It always becomes political. It's never about you. I was like, oh, that'll never happen to me. Right. I was so wrong. And I was talking to folks trying to get some information about what was the process like and how did it go. And I got some great advice from one of my friends who had helped shepherd a couple of secretaries through the confirmation process during the Clinton administration. And one of my friends said, keep your ears open. Keep your ears open. At some point in your process, you're going to get bad advice from the agency who you think is supporting you. And at that point, you have to take control over your process. And I was like, what? That's crazy. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But I, filed it away and started the process. And my process was a 13-month process. From the time they first contacted me, would you be interested in throwing your hat in the ring? Sure, I'll never get that. Why not? Sure. To being in the secretary's office and, hey, I'll give you the job. And you're like, oh my God, again, what have I just done? And to then go through this confirmation process. And I had my confirmation hearing. It went fine. And there were 4 of us, and the other nominee, the director of the Bureau of Land Management, took most of the questions. I took the second most, and there were these 2 Department of Energy people who were like, they asked us like nothing, right? They were like firing at you guys. And it went fine, and I, Mom was there, my sister, my sister showed up, it was incredible. And, I go skiing, I'm a cross-country skier. It was December, and I go out on holiday up in Quebec to go skiing. And I'm like, here we go. I come back, and there's a letter from 4 senators to me. And I'm like, what's this letter about? And it's about a rule that I had never heard of. And they were complaining about the rule and the process at the Interior Department, and what was I going to do about it? I had never seen it. It had never been issued to the public, ever. And the reason the letter was important is that there was a Democrat on the letter, and the letter said, we won't vote for you out of committee unless you agree to change something you've never seen. So I was like, gee, this is a problem. And I, because I work at a big law firm, I download this Inspector General report about this rule that had come out while I was skiing. And I read it and I draft a response. That is kind of a very vanilla response, like, I take your concerns very carefully, important, it's very important. And, if confirmed, I'll look into it. Like one of those. And I send it to Interior, and, they're like, well, we don't want you to respond. And I was like, what? That just seems wacky. These people have to vote for me. I'm not even in government, and you want me to tell them, F you? I'm not, that seems weird to me. And, there was basically the department didn't want to encourage senators from writing to private citizens, and so they had their policy reasons. But at the end of the day, I was like, this rule is not about me. I wasn't there when it got messed up, and it pissed them off. But if I don't respond to them, it's going to become about me. It's going to become personal. And weeks go by, and they nothing. I keep calling, you send it up yet? You send it up yet? No, nothing. And then suddenly, just because the fates would have it, I got called for a second confirmation hearing, along with one of my other colleagues. Out of the 155 then pending nominees, only 2 of us had the privilege of doing a second confirmation hearing. And for me, it was over this rule that I had never seen, and at that point had never responded to their letter. And so I actually had to threaten the department. I actually said, I'm not going until you send up, I'm not going to appear. I'm just not going to appear unless you send up a response. So go figure it out. And they did, and it all went well. The reason I tell that story is I could have gotten mad, I could have gotten upset, but I had the confidence from talking to my friends and from my other colleagues about how to help me navigate through something I had never navigated through before. The whole thing seemed completely insane to me. But that's the importance of your networks, and that's the importance of having people that you can trust to give you that confidence to make decisions that are the right decisions for you personally, even when the institution who's supposed to be supporting you is saying something completely different. Oh, yellow card. Okay. All right. Okay. So quickly, and I got so many. I got so much. All right, I'll save some of it. Another lesson learned: don't stay in dead-end jobs. Just don't. My first career, I was a marine biologist, and I loved it. I loved being in the water. I loved doing the work, and I was working at an organization, and I had a boss who just was discriminating on the basis of sex. And we had a mixed group of scientists. That one went. We had a mixed group of scientists, and women were not allowed in the water. This was a problem, right? A marine biologist, right? I can't, so I left. I was like, and he was surprised. When people give you bad advice, as in my last example, don't take it. Don't take it. Be critical of what people are saying to you and think it through. Does that make the most amount of sense for you? I had a colleague, we pitched some work. I was the subject matter expert. I was going to write the briefs. I was going to do the oral argument. He knew the guy, okay? And so when we were thinking about how do you separate the credit for it, I'm thinking 50-50, right? He comes to me, he goes 80-20, 80 for him. And I'm like, what? And then he had an objective. He's like, I talked to the office managing partner. He thinks I'm right. I'm like, I don't really care what he thinks. Like, that's not equitable for me, and it's important to be able to articulate, if you feel that you're not being treated fairly, to say that and to have a conversation about that. And I also talked to a couple of other people, like, oh, stupid, God, can you believe it? And they went to talk to him and said, yeah, that's a bad idea. So if it sounds wacky to you, it probably is. The other big important thing is take credit for your successes, including when you've taken risks for your successes. Women tend to talk in we rather than I. I do it all the time. My team is great. We did this, we did that, even when I had to rewrite everything. But there are appropriate points in time where you should take credit for the work that you've done and make it clear that you were the one responsible for doing that work. Okay, so let me go to this slide because it's something that I think is really important. We all have confidence, and you should take confidence about your life, from your life experience, because we're all quite competent in what we do. We wouldn't be where we are now if we weren't competent in those things. But sometimes when we see men and women around us, we sometimes need to give them a little push, to help them with their confidence. And this slide is a really important slide. And this is from the article that I told you about at the outset of this talk. And what it says is that success, as it turns out, correlates just as closely with confidence as it does with competence. And the good news is that confidence can be acquired, which means that the confidence gap, in turn, can be closed. Now, let's go back to that former associate that I met on the street. I sent her this article, and I said, do what you want. It's your business. It's your business. But it did change her, she read it, and it changed her negotiation strategy with every firm that she was talking to. And she returned to her firm as an equity partner. And now she is the deputy office managing partner over 300 people, an opportunity that would not have been available to her if she had been a non-equity partner. So it's important for all of us to recognize, when someone could use a little help with their confidence, and we should all be there for them as well as for ourselves. So thank you very much for listening.
How can we change the dynamic that successful assertive women are not seen as likable?
Well, and we talked about this at the Skill Builder, and I am a very strong believer in the concept of how to communicate. And I'm a very assertive person, no question about it. And what I've learned over time in my career is you have to. Let me say it this way. You have to. So you have to do it this way. It's beneficial to learn how to talk to people in a way that they can hear it. And that doesn't mean that you're any less assertive. And I go back to, the story that I told earlier in this talk about how I learned that I needed to moderate my response to my private clients from my government clients, although I'm sure they would have preferred me to talk to them that way as well. And so I do think that it's great to be assertive. I do think that the way you communicate with people is a really important part of how you're perceived as a woman leader or as a woman in the workplace generally, and to think about, and this took me a long time because as I talked about earlier today in the Skill Builder, my thinking about how to communicate has evolved significantly. It's one of the things that I've learned, and I'm still learning as I go through life. And know your audience and think through the ways that you can communicate with them in a way that they'll actually hear and have a positive response. Help them get to yes.
What are your thoughts on the so-called fake it till you make it confidence strategy?
I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not. I just am not. I think you will feel more confident as your competence increases. And I think that if you're just kind of faking it and, that's where a lot of people, I think, at least the folks that I've talked to, can feel actually at their most vulnerable because there's a secret. Which I don't know what I'm talking about, right? And what if somebody finds out? And that can create a lot of anxiety. And when you're filled with anxiety, you're just not as focused as you are if you are not filled with anxiety. And there are actually studies that show that increases in stress can actually have a negative result on critical thinking and performance. And so for those reasons, I'm not a fan. And I think if it takes a little extra work to feel comfortable with your confidence, then I'd be more inclined to recommend putting that additional work in.
This next one's it's kind of interesting. Is there a society that actually values risk-taking in women outside of New York City, I think?
And what can we learn? You got to just fit in.
And what can we learn from them? In other words, have you come across a sort of a culture that you think, wow, they value this more than we do?
No.
No,
I've not been exposed to that. But I'd love to know. At the Amazons, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Wonder Woman, I don't know.
Oh, okay. Here's something from, I think it's from somebody in the Public Lands group, and it's good. How can we expect local state resource users to come to the table when all their work and commitment to the resource is usually disregarded at the top level? Top level.
I'm assuming they're talking about the new administration.
I am too.
Right. So with that assumption in mind, reaching out to those stakeholders is critically important. And there may be frustrations, but I think it's important to pick up the phone, and have a conversation. I think if a decision is about to be rendered that's negative, give that, if you're able, give that person the courtesy of letting them know, and really try to form a relationship with them. As everyone knows, those at the top come and go, and so policies change, but it's really the folks who are here on the ground that need to have those close relationships with the wide variety of stakeholders that they have to engage in at the federal level, to have that level of stability and also a level of trust as things change. I mean, some would say there are some wacky things going on, but if you are able to maintain the relationship here on the ground, that helps to moderate things.
What advice would you give looking back to your college self? Besides the beer.
Yeah, the beer. I went to the University of Miami in the 80s. So yeah, beer. Beer was okay. I think the biggest advice I would give myself, my younger self, is to learn to be more patient. And that's also something that I continue to work on a daily basis. It was a huge learning experience for me personally when I went to the Interior Department. I was coming out of this law firm where everyone's rowing actually in the same direction, and that's not how Interior works. I mean, Interior with its 10 agencies, the agencies have diverse missions. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of lateral. There's a lot of kind of crazy stuff. You're like, what? But it happens. And so I had to really kind of dig deep into myself and really focus on being patient, both with sometimes individuals, like never get mad at work, but also more importantly, there's the whole dynamic of what was going on around me. And so, I can, as I said, I continue to work on that to this day, but that's definitely something that I would tell my younger self. I would also tell my younger self to think before you speak, and that was something that I suffered from a lot when I was much younger.
These two are kind of related. Have you ever not felt confidence, and what did you do? And related to it, how about sharing some tips on building that confidence that worked for you? Yes. There have absolutely been times where I was not confident. My first trial, for example, and that continues, every day. I mean, there are things that come up, particularly when things are new, and you're first getting exposed to it, and you're like, I'm not really sure I know exactly what I'm doing. In the law, you're constantly faced with ever-changing statutes and requirements, and you've got clients calling you, and they're saying, I need an answer, and I need an answer yesterday, and you're like, well, that's a really long statute, and I actually haven't read it yet. And so, you learn to find ways to give yourself some more time and space so that you can do the work you need to do to give you that confidence. I mean, for me, it's through preparation. I'm a big proponent of preparation, as you can see from my flight out. But that works for me. That preparation helps me to feel confident. And I also think that the more you do something, the more confident you get. So a good example would be oral arguments and public speaking. When I first started doing oral arguments in front of a judge and all of these, more learned attorneys and, other people in the back, these people, they are in the back of the courtroom. I don't know what they do during the day, but they're there. And so, you're like, oh my gosh, I was get really nervous that, before I would have an oral argument, because you didn't want to mess it up. You didn't want to lose. I mean, it's very public when you lose in court. They write an opinion. She lost, and then people can find it on the internet, and so that's kind of a drag. But so, I was getting nervous, and then I kept doing them, and I kept doing them. I kept doing them. And then one day I wasn't nervous, and it was like riding a bike. I was just not nervous.
And I thought, well, I'll be nervous when I go, testify in front of Congress, which I had never done before. And I wasn't, which was odd, and then I was like, don't play with them, dial it back. And then speeches, right? I go to Interior. I hadn't given a lot of public speeches. I talked in court, but not in front of a lot of people. They were like, okay, day 3, you have a speech, go, you know nothing about the topic, go, So you learn to roll with it and to do some additional work along the way, and that's how you help to build competence, is sometimes through repetition.
This one is probably on the minds of some people here that actually have to deal with this. How do you support and encourage?
Wait, before you ask that question, can I tell one story? Is the flag up?
No.
Right, so.
Red card, no red card.
Okay. So just on the point of talking in front of a large audience, this was my most out there public experience. So there's a statute, called SNPLMA. It's a long acronym. But it's basically where we sell public land around the Las Vegas area and then use that money for conservation purposes. And so we were working with Senator Reid on his Lake Tahoe summit. And as a supporting event to the summit, we were going to fast forward a bunch of money. It was like $80 million. And, that'd be a nice little event to have on the side. And Secretary was supposed to do it, but then she had to go, do something more important. Lead a U.S. delegation or something like that. So I said, well, I think I have the authority to do this. And they were like, no, you don't. And I was like, no, I think I actually do. And so, I did. And so I went out and, we're going to do this side event. And somehow, I'm not really sure how it happened, but Senator Reid's staff heard about it, and they decided they were going to incorporate it into the event. And I was like, okay. That sounds great. I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. I fly out to Lake Tahoe, and they send me the agenda. So I'm like on the way, right? And it says, Senator Reid, Senator Feinstein, Senator Boxer, Governor Jerry Brown of California, Janice Schneider, President of the United States. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? And then a band. There was a band playing also. The senator's favorite band. So, yeah, that was the event. And it was like, holy cow. But because I had done all of this other public speaking and work, I was ready for it. And it was like 7,500 people, who really were there to hear the band. But it was really fun. So anyway, I wanted to share that story because it's a cool story.
One serious question, then I'll make a quick announcement and ask you a last question after that really plays off that little story. But hold on.
Okay.
How do you support and encourage the women that work for you without showing favoritism? I want to meet with or mentor with the women that work for me, but don't want the men to feel left out or alienated, especially as I'm everyone's boss.
Right. So I try to meet with everyone. I make it a special point to have, meetings with my staff. I spend time in their office. I often will go to their office to talk with them about how they're doing, how they're feeling, to the extent they want to share it with me, how their personal lives are going, because sometimes that is very impactful to their performance in the office. And I made it a point to, make the rounds regularly so people felt that they were being treated equitably. And I would encourage a lot of them to help support some of the younger folks in our office as well.